Ellecer Carlos is spokesperson for the iDEFEND Human Rights Coalition in the Philippines in defense of freedom and dignity movement, Human Rights and Dignity movement. He's a highly sought after speaker. This is his second trip to Vienna this week, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Mr. David Borden. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank StopTheDrugWar.org, a crucial ally at this point in terms of asserting and defending human rights in the Philippines, and of course Senator Marco. And warm greetings of human rights solidarity to all. And yeah, just to introduce iDEFEND. iDEFEND was established last August, or August 2016, precisely to respond to these mass killings, and of course to provide refuge also for the many families of victims of extrajudicial killings. We're now engaged in our second International Solidarity and Information Tour, precisely to shed information, dispel the myths that that Duterte has been sowing through his propaganda machinery, and really contribute to Filipinos breaking the silence. This violent president is really dependent on a mass base outside the Philippines, our huge overseas Filipino workforce. No? All of us are aware of this drug war operating outside the rule of law, which has made human life very cheap in the Philippines, and is the worst human rights crisis since the Marcos dictatorship, one that is dehumanizing all Filipinos. It's clear that President Duterte established a permission structure for mass murder. It's clear that he redefined the rules of impunity and institutionalized it. He popularized the idea that the crisis in our country can be solved by exterminating addicts, drug dependents, and criminals. He conditioned the Philippine National Police to be quick on the trigger and have a general contempt for the rule of law, promising the protection from litigation, putting up a reward system, and forced quotas, firing or transferring police officers if they do not meet the required results. No? Hitler style, he effectively dehumanized and defined drug dependence as the inconvenient sector, no? Hitler style. Through sustained incitement, hate, and violence, this kill society's undesired or de facto social cleansing policy has led to the deaths of conservatively 12,000, but our qualitative data actually reveals a definite pattern of what human rights experts refer to as police vigilantism, whereby the president and high officials of the land can dissociate themselves legally from the killings, but nonetheless claim them as accomplishments of the state. So this has led to the deaths of the most neglected, beaten down, impoverished individuals, no? Including children. We have offered solutions, no? Compassionate, evidence-based, sustainable health and human rights-centered approaches which have been effective elsewhere in the world. This violent approach has never worked elsewhere. Also, radical reforms in our inoperable and anti-poor criminal justice system, and most importantly, an investment in a life of dignity. There is a huge market of beaten down, impoverished Filipinos in the Philippines predisposed to becoming exploited into a life of crime and drugs. So it's clear to Duterte that there is a direct relationship between the decrease of crime and the rise of a standard of living. But this government, this president does not have a social agenda that will uplift the lives of the poor. We have been monitoring his social agenda. It's the same economic policies that will deepen inequality. So instead of consulting and listening to us, he demonized human rights defenders. He demonized us. He actually sowed misperceptions about human rights ideals, values, and principles, and defined us as the enemy, and presented human rights groups as coddlers of criminals and obstructionists of justice and development, and promoted the narrative the world will never be safe for as long as these human rights groups are here. This has eroded public belief in human rights and secured some level of public acceptance should the killings spill over to our sector. He has ordered the police ordered the police to shoot if we obstruct justice, and even publicly said that he will harvest us together with addicts, no? Using the word harvest. This situation has drastically constricted space for human rights discourse and defense. What is the impact of this drug war? This endangers everyone in Philippine society. This, anyone can now be accused of being a drug dependent and not have the opportunity to defend themselves in court. Contempt of the rule of law by law enforcers leads to the breakdown of our democratic institutions. We threaten to transfigure the mindsets of our entire policing establishment, transforming even the most law-abiding police officers into butchers. We threaten to throw away all human rights education work that we have invested in for the past 32 years. Human rights groups and the Commission on Human Rights. The normalization of the killings is worsening the collective sociopathy or damage to civic behavior. Now Duterte has extended the drug war up to 2022. The problem is now that the dormant death squad network has been unleashed into an entire epidemic. It's important to actually expose his true intentions, as Senator Trillanes has mentioned. This drug war is just part of a whole scenario. It is a tool to actually advance his authoritarian agenda. As a populist tool to establish a culture of fear and silence. For us, it's about the falling apart of democracy and the retrogression into dictatorship and the disintegration of Philippine society. The situation today is the closest we have been to an authoritarian government in 30 years, with him rolling back the gains in human rights and democracy. His two political projects now, charter change and federalism, are nothing more than the realignment of the elite with the Visayan and Mindanao elite actually wanting a bigger share of the pie, and it risks dissolving nationalist economic and human rights provisions, doing away with safeguards and checks and balances on term extension, judicial and congressional review of a martial law declaration, and abolish constitutional commissions such as the Commission on Human Rights. They also have a well-oiled propaganda machinery which has been put in place when he entered office. No, it's efficient in terms of sowing misperceptions, half-truths, and lies, and of course his anti-human rights and kill rhetoric and shaping public opinion. He also has made full use of bureaucratic and political apparatuses to carry out political persecution of those who represent our checks and balances, and of course his political critics. No, that includes even misogynistic public comments. Our Vice President, Senator De Lima, our Supreme Court Chief, and our Ombudsperson's Chief. He's been whitewashing the Marcos years, no, paving the way for the rehabilitation of the Marcos name, as well as a political situation of the Marcoses, of the comeback. Yes, institutionalized vigilantism, pseudo mass movements as Hitler style, setting up actually extremist nationalist groups that and they're organizing rallies that is publicly or governmentally funded, which is constricting space for genuine public actions. What are the challenges for us human rights defenders in the Philippines? It's enormous and unprecedented. While being targeted as threatened as the next targets, we must persevere to fight apathy and help Philippine society establish respect for life and reclaiming our collective humanity. The difference between then, Marcos dictatorship, and now, there is a huge section of Philippine society actually misled and detesting us, no? And of course, this death squad epidemic can be used against us anytime. While government now upgrading its surveillance capacity and infrastructure. A lot of us are in the persons of interest list as well. And our task now is to expose the duplicity of Duterte, who claims to be anti-poor but really has no social agenda. And how to make sure that our fellow Filipinos will not behave like the good Germans of the Nazi era. Also documenting cases and providing sanctuaries to families of victims of extrajudicial killings. It's important to hold this president accountable. And Duterte has shown that he can kill thousands. The rest, curtailing civil liberties, declaring one-man rule, will be a mopping up operation. So our calls now, we have been campaigning for the Philippines to be suspended from the Human Rights Council. It does not deserve to be there. And of course, an international independent investigation into the killings, no? So essentially, we strongly condemn the increasing attacks against human rights defenders and political activists, including the placing of the UN Special Rapporteur on Indigenous Peoples' Rights and other defenders on a terrorist list. The killings of political and social activists have already begun, no? So if he can declare martial law, justify martial law declaration in Mindanao, he's just waiting for the right pretext to declare it nationwide with a total breakdown of the peace talks with the CPP and the FNP. So thank you.
So thank you, Borden. We unfortunately only have a couple of minutes.